Chelsea went and did the cleaning of the back office space, the closet space. She found a roll of blueprints, and they were for various different things and maps and stuff. And one of them was a gridded out pattern for the emergency bay and the community meeting room. And so though we would have to verify, on the ground by taping it out and measuring, we were able to have something that's a grid pattern for that bay and get a much better idea of how many people we can fit in that space. And except that I was setting up. Oh, so we're live now. Me talking about finding that map so that we can look at that stuff.
Okay.
All right, let me. All right, and I'm gonna go grab that from Chelsea right now. We have 3 minutes until the meeting goes live, but we are live on YouTube right now.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna go grab that from Chelsea right now. Live are live on.
So did you learn how to use waiting room? Hi, Jan. Hi, Kristen. So did you learn how to use waiting room? Hi, Kristen.
Hello, how are you?
Good. This is Walter.
Yes. Luckily, your name's right underneath.
Hey. And
Everybody checking in.
hi, Jan.
How you doing?
Hi, Kristen.
Hi. Yeah. Luckily, your name's right underneath.
Do we have a confirmation from Cheryl, Owen?
I do not know. I can give her a call though and see what she's up to.
But I will. But Owen. Go to Owen.
Oh. Sorry, did I make you lose your connection by calling you? Okay, perfect. Oh, then I'll get off the phone with you. I might have booted her. She was trying to come on, and then I called and she went away.
So is your whole professional life Zoom calls, Kristen?
Yes. Yeah, I'd say the more annoying part is that we have a lot of departmental meetings in my firm now to kind of keep track of things, law changes and such. So there are a lot of those types of things that aren't actually, work for clients. So that's annoying. The other annoying part is that my partner, Steve Langsdorf, managed to get himself stuck down at his second home in Florida for all of this. So every time he's on a call with me, you've got the palm trees swaying in the background.
Oh, okay. Cheryl, you're on?
Yep.
Okay, I will call the meeting to order. And welcome and thank you, Kristen, for giving us your time. Are there adjustments to the agenda? This is a formal select board meeting, is it not? Noticed and everything?
Correct.
Okay.
You didn't put an agenda out though, did you?
I thought that yes, no, I did. It was basically 2 item discuss and then potential voting to set a new town meeting date for the only 2 items.
I got it.
Okay, so can the audience hear me, the YouTube audience?
When I had YouTube pulled up on the laptop, I was able to hear audio, and I have it pulled up here. I haven't seen any comments saying, but it's been streaming now for 8 minutes, and there are 4
Okay.
people watching.
All right. Just if they have questions, they know to log those questions and we'll take them at the end.
Correct, or if it's an applicable question, I might at an appropriate time raise it to you all to see if you want to respond.
Okay. All right.
Oh, and Penny just commented and said, yes, audio is good.
Okay. First of all, is there any update from the MMA letter to the governor, Kristen, that you know of? And what is your sense of how that's going to go?
I'm almost wondering, since as of June 1st, there is a way to have meetings of under 50 people, that it's not going to have the urgency that I thought it would have, with the governor having to fix something so that all our small towns could hold town meetings. But I would not be surprised if there's some order that's passed that says that for towns that haven't used secret ballot before, that they'll be allowed to for the purposes of this election. this summer. But she's been incredibly responsive, and the orders come out quickly after they've been requested, and I don't see any downside to that request. So, I think it's going to happen, but let's say it happens in a week or two. We need to make plans now, from what I understand. So,
And
okay.
real quick-
The other thing, just for the benefit of the audience, we are constrained from, if we were to put our warrant on the ballot in July at the primary election, we can't do that because we have never adopted that secret ballot methodology for selecting officers or passing warrant articles. Is that the law that's in place?
right. And the thing about that is it requires a town meeting vote to adopt the secret ballot process. And so, it would be completely ineffectual to have a town meeting just to do that. And then we have to wait 90 days before that takes effect.
Right.
So by that point, we're in November anyway, and hopefully a lot of this is behind us.
And one thing real quick, Walter, I have been in communication with an individual who works in the governor's office, works directly for Hannah Pingree, who's kind of been charged with the municipal end of this. And I emailed with that person today asking if there'd been any update. And they said that they hadn't heard anything new and that they would let me know.
Yeah, and my firm is talking to the governor's office a few times a week too, and specifically keeping track of this issue, and hasn't heard anything either.
If I may interrupt,
Yep.
I'm just on audio. I spoke with a legal at MMA today, asking if they've had any response, and they have no known response at this point, and possibly individually, he does not know that they'll even get one. So that's just an opinion. So no word from MMA. I mean, no word from the governor.
Okay, so let me go back. Let me start with kind of an overriding priority. And if June 1st comes and we can have gatherings of 50 or less, that's nice, but that may not work for us for a lot of reasons. But the key thing I think that we want to do is we want to send out tax bills on August 1st, which means that we need to set a mill rate sometime between about July 21st and August 1st, which means we need to have a budget, which means we need to have a vote. So can you walk this group through the scenario you described to me the other day for how we get a budget without getting the rest of the warrant in front of the population?
Yes, and I say that with the caveat that when we talked about that, I didn't know that we would be able to have meetings of 50 or fewer come June. I think that provides a pretty valid second option. But what Walter and I discussed is something that, frankly, I don't think has ever been done because it's never been needed. But as you know, you can have a written ballot at an open town meeting election, which is very different than a secret ballot. A secret ballot election is what you expect from a statewide election where you're at the polls, there's absentee balloting and all of that. But if you think about in the context of your open meeting where you have people submit written ballots for the election of officials, I'm thinking of using that process. You would include on your warrant a statement that on the budget article, it is going to be moved by written ballot, and balloting will be left open for a period of, say, 2 or 3 hours. You would have the opening of the meeting on Zoom or whatever you use so that the public can see, the election of the moderator, and then somebody moving the first question and also moving that it be voted upon by written ballot and held open for the 2 or 3 hours that you've put on your warrant. And then people would be able to come in and submit their written ballots after they verify they're a town voter. And that's how the election would be held, or the meeting vote would be held on the budget. So it's not, a common process, obviously, but I think it accomplishes the fact that you've got a warrant that's been properly noticed. People have adequate warning of how they're supposed to participate. They actually get a bigger window of time. They don't have to show up to the town meeting. So I can't see where people would be able to, say, oh, I didn't get a chance to participate or to vote, which is really the thing that can invalidate an election, right? If you use some strange procedure and people are robbed of the opportunity of participating, then they might have a complaint. But this would hopefully expand the opportunity without subjecting people to the risks of all being packed in the same room. And since Walter and I talked, actually, I heard that the town of, I think, Bow, New Hampshire, did something like this. They didn't have a secret ballot process, and they used sort of an open meeting process, but they had their balloting done in a drive-through system where people actually, never even got out of their cars and came into the office, but were handed a ballot and handed that right back during the course of the drive-in period. And they had actually the highest turnout of any recent election by using that, kind of strange drive-through process. So that would be interesting. So yeah, that is definitely an option. But then, now that we have the ability to have an open meeting with 50 people or fewer, I've definitely talked to a number of towns, even a town as big as Wyndham, about breaking their meeting up into 1 or 2 rooms. I mean, I suspect that in South Thomaston's case, you're going to have a little bit lower turnout than usual. And it looked like your turnout is usually somewhere between 50 and 75, if I remember right. So if you could probably bank on there being fewer than 50 people. But if you wanted to plan for 2 rooms just to spread people out as far as possible, you could certainly do that, have an electronic feed between the 2 rooms, and have moderator in room A and deputy moderator in room B. And those people communicate about what the vote was by show of hands. And that's definitely a viable option as well.
So a gathering would be 50 people in the fire bay and 50 people in the community room. Is 2 gatherings of 50 and not 1 gathering of 100? I
think you'd be absolutely fine with that. I really do. As long as you're not filtering everybody through the same, check-in space. Ideally, you'd have somebody posted to check people in at the other room.
And people can wear masks. They can be offered a mask.
I think people will still have to wear masks at that point. And it would be wise if you could, get a stockpile of them, because we don't want anybody kicked out because they don't have access to a mask.
Correct.
We did just receive our order of masks. So the town has ample masks to provide to everyone in attendance, and all the rooms of which we've been discussing do have individual ingress and egress. So we could have 2 different or possibly 3 different check-in stations. And if you have 7 people outside of the fire bay, you can have 50 people in the fire bay. So you could have 43 with the doors closed and 23 in the community meeting room, all of which are spaced 6 feet apart.
So, I mean, that is my preference with budget voting, because I've definitely seen towns maybe 5 or 10 years ago, the big trend was to try to do your whole election by secret ballot, and that includes budgets. And a bunch of towns would try to do this, and then their budget gets voted down, and we don't know which category people didn't like, and you're forced with having to put it back on another vote to try to discern what an approvable budget would be. And you might end up back at an open town meeting anyway, trying to figure out what's, an approvable budget. And budget very well may be a hot topic this year.
And that was the case. You represented Waldeboro when that case went to the Supreme Court, correct?
I absolutely did. Would rather not do it again, even though we won. But yeah, in that case, they actually had an ordinance that required secret ballot voting, and then the board got sick of the budget being voted down, so they put it back on for an open town meeting vote, and then were challenged. But that's exactly why they did, because it just wasn't a tenable process for the budget.
People like to have discussions.
Yeah, and that's certainly the tradition in South Thomaston on town meeting.
So our
Yep.
written ballot, Kirsten, if I understand, then would be broke down just like our normal warrant is, that we vote on, by raise of hands. The written ballot would be broke down by departments, and and so on, so that if one part could get voted up, one voted down, and we would know.
Yeah, that would be up to you all and how you wanted to craft the warrant. There's nothing wrong with presenting the budget all as one warrant article. And then it's take it or leave it, you know, yes or no vote, except for that when it's moved, you could, you know, whoever moves the motion, and you might have 10 diehard people in the audience when that happens, and somebody could make a motion that's different than what's printed on the warrant. They can move it down, but not up. And if that happens, then that's what people would be voting on in writing. So that's the tricky part, right? If somebody changes the wording of the warrant article by motion, then how do people who are coming in to vote know? You might have to have a pause so that, you know, however many written ballots can be printed up that have the right language on it.
Because normally our budget items have been considered motioned and seconded before it goes to vote. So it really just goes to vote at the town meeting, because the select board motions and the budget committee seconds, and we both vote before it ever gets to the town meeting. So theoretically, I guess if we did it the same way, you wouldn't have to move and second at the town meeting.
Well, any town meeting article has to be moved and seconded,
Right.
in order for there to be a floor vote. And that gives somebody the opportunity to propose an amendment.
Mhm.
So it could happen, even though it's been talked about, vetted, and agreed upon.
No, I agree. It could still be amended.
Yeah.
And our budget articles are always uncapped
Well, they would have to be capped in this.
in this scenario, they'd have to be capped.
I mean, it's not that they would have to be, but they really should be. People should know in advance what they're going to be dropping in to vote on.
Okay. Owen, you had your hand up?
Yes, so there was a question on the YouTube about the scenario under which 150 people show up for town meeting. We did go over and look at kind of historical attendance records. Unless we missed something or needed to go back further, going back into the basically 2009 range and coming forward to today, we never cleared 150. We had some years to where there was 130, but going over 2019, 18, and 17, in 2017, 60 was the attendance, 54 and 18, 50 and 19. In 2016, we did have 92, and in 2015, we had 108. So there are scenarios under which, the fire bay and the community room and potentially the basement, though that is not the preferred option. We could utilize all those to try to max attendance. However, if it's a good, nice day, we might be able to accommodate more folks in the paved area in front of the fire bay and extend it out that way. But I would find it unlikely if we're clearing 150 people.
Yeah, well, I think that the discussion about the multiple rooms, et cetera, is a discussion more about, what's the magic about the number 50? It's almost an arbitrary number. Fact is, if you get the disease, it doesn't matter whether you got it when you're sitting in a group of 50 or whether you were sitting at home with your husband or wife or partner. So I think our discussion about whether we pursue a town meeting in June is really going to focus on what we feel is safe and what our population is going to feel comfortable with, and how the fear of being out and about might influence people's participation in a town warrant article, which I think is probably more significant than any since the fire truck. Because there's there's not unanimity of opinion on 3 or 4 of those warrant articles, which means that it's going to be not a lively town meeting. So the question is whether we're going to discourage people from participating in that because they're afraid to be with 10 people, much less 50. So I think that's a discussion, a safety discussion that we have next week. And boy, people out there, I'd like to hear from you about that, your feelings about that. Because what you should take away from tonight is that we have a method that we can deploy to pass a budget. We have a set of options to pass the rest of the warrant, but let's keep in, the rest of the warrant is not sacrosanct for the year 2020. If push came to shove, I don't see anything in that warrant that has to happen in 2020, or the world will crumble. You know, that's just kind of my thought process. Yeah, Owen.
I have a question about some of those items, because under the scenario of which Kristen's laying out, we basically have two articles, one to do the moderator and another to pass the budget. There are a range of kind of annual must-do powers to approve for the select board, except real estate, interest rates, items like that. Where would the town stand? Because my understanding is the scenario of which you're describing, we're only holding one warrant article open for those 2 to 3 hours. And then there is really no additional option for another warrant article unless we want to hold it open for another 2 to 3 hours and allow people to vote on that. So are we leaving the town in some sort of deficiency where we're constraining it to just simply these 2 warrant articles? Because you can't really go to warrant article 3 until you've disposed of warrant article 2. And we do have things, authorize the select board to utilize surplus funds to reduce the amount of funds raised at annual town meeting, to appoint all necessary officials, accept and dispose of real estate, accept gifts on the town. So I mean, if someone writes a check for the cemetery fund, is the select board even allowed to then accept that and us to put it into monies for that intended purpose? And that's, I suppose, my concern about the scenario that we've laid out around the holding the vote open for a period of time and allowing folks to come in and vote by written ballot, is where would we stand on those kind of annual powers given to the board?
That's a great question. I would say that those authorities that were given by last year's town meeting hold over through this one, because they don't have an expiration date and they're traditionally adopted on an meeting to meeting basis. So the next town meeting would address them, but as long as they didn't have an expiration date, like applicable to the 2020 budget, for instance, I think they would probably hold over.
How about if there are 2 financial articles that are ex-budget but important. One is a borrowing authorization and the other is the creation of a reserve account. Can we repackage those into the budget article?
I think your borrowing article, is that borrowing from yourself?
No, it's
Or is
borrowing.
it a bond?
It's a bank. It's a loan.
A loan. That one should be on its own. Bond counsel is very persnickety about those sort of things. And they're also persnickety about the process. So I would be a little bit concerned using a process that's a little outside the box on that sort of a bond authorization or loan authorization. But if you have to and it doesn't pass muster with bond counsel, I suppose you could redo it at a later date.
To throw it out there, I mean, I would defer to what you're thinking is, Kristen, but it's a borrowing of no more than $38,000, and from our conversation with the financial institute, we don't need to go to bond counsel for that lower amount. And
Well,
it would be paid back by the cost savings. It's a street light, LED street light, and so we would be reducing what it is that we pay to CMP, and so using that savings to pay that back. And because of the low amount, they said we didn't need to go to bond counsel.
Okay, Yep, I remember that article. And yeah, I mean, I think you're probably fine to do it. So if I wouldn't recommend that you do this sort of drive-through balloting process for more than a couple of articles. I think it would get a little too confusing. However, you know, I don't see why it has to only be one article that you do that way. You could have a motion on Article 2 and then a motion on Article 3, and they all say to hold the balloting open for however long. And you have a ballot that's printed or ready to be printed that can be handed to people as they show up.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. We could craft the ballot to let them vote on multiple articles
Right.
and not have to hold each article 3 hours more, you know, like you were saying, Owen. Just give it a 3-hour voting window for the ballot. And that would include everything on it.
I think, you know, the only thing that you want to make sure if you're going to use that process is to just be absolutely clear in the warrant and any notices that you put up of a meeting that people are certainly able and encouraged to attend if they want to make any motions related to the content of the articles. I don't want people to feel like it's a take it or leave it situation, because that's the whole idea of an open town meeting, is that they can show up, participate, make motions, make amendments.
Exactly.
And so, you know, your diehard people still could do that. They just, you know, if they didn't need to, if people were willing to just, you know, let others make the motions and vote up or down, they can certainly show up just to cast their ballot.
My disposition would be that we do a Zoom call or to the town, and anybody who wants to participate can participate. And what we do as the board is we do a review of that budget. You know, account by account. Here's what we're asking, because it's our budget. So here's what we're asking you to pay for, and it's going to show up on a ballot at this particular time. So we essentially have a you know, a Zoom budget hearing, if you will. Owen?
So for us here on the town office end, whatever it is that the board comes up with, we have to then do and implement for you all. And it seems like there's like 3 different conversations happening here. There's a Zoom conversation and allowing things that way. That's got its own set of logistical hurdles and challenges. There's the fact that we can't deny people, the diehards, like Kristen's talking about, to come and participate. And then we have to then have secret ballot or written ballots for articles that we hold open for a certain period of time. I'm not saying that it can't be done, but that's a significant challenge for a 3 full-time staff office to accommodate for. And it's actually like 3 different processes at the same time simultaneously. So I'm going to have to be managing Zoom while checking in voters into the fire bay and then making sure that someone's outside to collect ballots at the same time. It just seems very complicated, unless I'm somehow confusing all of this.
Yeah, no, I think you'd sequence that. So you'd have your budget discussion via Zoom, maybe even a day or 2 before, or you could have it an hour or 2 before. And that's its own compartmentalized thing. Then you open the open meeting portion, and you do have that by Zoom, and you probably have some small number of voters that show up. You'd have your clerk or registrar at the door to check people in, and someone else making sure the Zoom is going well. You'd open the meeting, you'd elect a moderator, and you'd have motions made on Articles 2, 3, and 4, or whatever it is. And your written balloting would start, let's say, a half hour after you anticipate that process concluding. So then your group of people who's been there staffing the town meeting can be upfront and able to accept ballots. And then that also allows for maybe a half hour window of time should you need to make an amendment here or there to what you had printed up ready for people.
We could plan to assist you, Owen. I mean, there's no reason that, you know, we can't help you with that process. I'm speaking to selectmen, I'll speak for myself. You know, I certainly would be willing to come in and assist. We've also got election clerks that may be willing to come in and assist.
but we'd have to, three of us plus one have to be there anyway to elect Mike moderator.
Yeah, at the meeting, right?
And I'm good at Zoom. So anyhow, that's a discussion that we'll have before we make any final decisions. Again, I think one thing that I want to put my ear to the ground and encourage people to out there in the audience land to weigh in about how they feel about being in a room with 50 people in June.
Well, I think you're pretty sure. I don't even think you know you're going to have 50 people. I mean, I think
Right. Well, that
if there were 50 people, how would you feel?
I think not having 50 people does a disservice to this warrant article and this town meeting agenda. So that's why I say, you know, pass the budget and drop everything else. But that's, you know, more discussion on that. But, you know, looking at the, let's go put 50 people in a room. I mean, in my prior life, that was tantamount to implementing Microsoft's .0 of a new release. You're asking for trouble. Let somebody else find out how bad 50 people in a room is, rather than our residents who are older than most.
Well,
I'll get off my soapbox. Sorry, Cheryl.
well, I think we really need to have a meeting, physical meeting with people in the same place, somewhere near each other, in an attempt to have a regular town meeting and run it as best one can with spacing people out. And we can have those ballots pre-printed. So if people don't want to put the hands up, they can use the ballot. And there's an article that's been eliminated here, or overlooked, I should say, is electing a new selectman. I don't want that to go by the wayside.
You're good for another year, Cheryl.
Personal interest in that.
Yeah, well, I absolutely believe that in having a town meeting with active participation and motions and seconds and et cetera, and you know, I don't feel all that excited about doing that on June 9th. But anyhow, more discussion on that. I think, does anybody want more of Kristen's time?
Well, does she have an opinion on electing another selectman?
Well, that's the one area where we know for sure that there's holdover in office up until the point where you hold the election. So, you know, do that as you wish. It could be on the warrant now, it could be on a warrant later. I think everybody would understand if it's postponed along with a bunch of other town business.
Just to throw it out there, to be technical, I suppose, I believe the way that it's structured is that individual is held over until town meeting. And if we're having town meeting by this technology or the process that you're describing, then I suppose maybe town meeting would be over and we can't have things by a written ballot. I mean, we could have just a blank space, but we have no nominees. We have no individuals that took out and returned papers, so I can't put anyone's name on a ballot.
Well, you don't use nomination papers anyway, right?
Yeah.
We do.
Oh, you do. You use that hybrid process.
Right, and it's awkward. And so typically if no one's taken out papers and returned papers, it's disposed of on town meeting. No one is nominated at town meeting, but folks can speak in favor of someone. And then you just do a secret ballot at that point, and whoever gets the most write-ins is your next select board member. So we would be having town meeting, I suppose, under certain arguments. Cheryl's term is then up. We can still have a 2-member select board that constitutes, but I'm confused about some of that stuff.
Yeah, so annual town meeting is the meeting at which you elect officials. So if you have this meeting in June to adopt the budget or do whatever, that's actually technically a special town meeting. And so your annual meeting would be whenever it is, July, August, September, that you would have on the warrant, the election of that new select board member. So technically, Jan would be holding over, or sorry, who's coming up?
Cheryl, up.
Cheryl would be holding over in office until that annual meeting, which is the meeting at which you have the election scheduled.
Floating, okay.
Okay. Anything else? Well, we have her.
Oh, I did want to say, with all of those business articles that Owen was mentioning, like your authority to sell tax acquired property, things like that. I mean, you could certainly consolidate some of those into one article if you wanted to simplify, and if you're doing your, hold the ballots open kind of thing. If it makes you feel comfortable to have that cover on anything you plan to do, that might be one option to handle that stuff.
Great. So I'll probably be sending you some more articles to ponder.
Yeah, I think we need to draft, an article. We need to draft, a ballot, written ballot, and see what it would look like, how we would word the articles on there and which articles we'd include. And
I would suggest that you have me review the warrant well in advance too, because that's this whole thing I think is made or broken on the warrant, and making sure that it's got everything it needs in it.
Agree.
Yeah, we don't want you to go with us to the Supreme Court.
No. Even though, we'd win just like Waldeboro did.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Are there questions, Owen, from the audience?
We have one additional comment. So we have a couple. So Penny said it depends on what the ballot is, and that they had 175 in attendance roughly when law enforcement was proposed. Penny also noted that many residents do not have Zoom capabilities. And then Dorothy Merriweather commented that I do not want to be in a room with 50 people. I think Penny is correct in assuming a lot of people will want to vote.
Okay. I agree with that.
Yeah. I actually like the drive-by option, or having a window where people can bring their ballot by, keeping plenty of social distance. And
yeah. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
yeah, so moved.
Second.
All in favor, Jan?
I guess before I vote, I guess I want to be clear on what our next steps are, because we've got a meeting coming up here with the budget committee. What's the action items coming out of this meeting?
I think, well, the action item is to firm up the logistics of how we pass a budget. Meanwhile, we have to decide, we don't have to do that if we have a town meeting in multiple places. I guess the board can decide that, but I don't feel qualified to make that decision right now. I want to hear people's thoughts on that. Because if it were all the same to me, I'd pass the budget and drop everything else into next year, so that I don't want to hang around with 50 people in a room either.
Well, and I don't
I don't want to be in a room with 10.
You do.
Yet.
Governor could very well take some action here within the next week or so. We're hopeful.
There was a question, Penny asked a question, why can't we wait until early July? And I'll just say that it's likely been me and this office pushing that we reconcile this sooner rather than later. so that some of the items of which the select board and the budget committee have indicated by their votes on the budget and supporting that are items that we should be moving forward with for the town. And that's why I've been trying to push on having the budget resolved as soon as possible. And my kind of indication that we should be shooting for as soon in June as we could was because that's when the governor indicated lifting some of the restrictions on 10 people congregations and going to 50.
The school budget will not be voted on until July 17th, isn't it? It was 14th, whenever we're having
The primary, yeah.
the new primary. So if that passes, then we'll have that information to set the rate. So we need to have some kind of budget by or soon after that date.
Yeah, if we choose this method of passing just a budget without the full-blown town meeting, we need like 10 days of advanced planning to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 7-day notice and then 3 days to so my suggestion for the action item is that we plan on that, put all the pieces in place to do that, and then pick the time at which we want to do it. And I've never been constrained by June 1st or June 9th. That sense of urgency has never impacted me because, again, if you told me I had to be in a room with 50 people on June 9th, I'd say I'm not showing up. So, like I said, personal opinion, but
Well, that's what it's going to come down to. People are going to make their own decisions on it. No one's going to be forced to be there.
right.
But you want to offer people the opportunity to be there if you can, and then give them an alternative method if they can't be. Which is why I'd love to see that the secret ballot or something, or I'm sorry, that the absentee ballot or something else be authorized. And
Well,
that kind of gives us some leeway that we can hold a traditional meeting for those people that are comfortable. Being in a big room like the garage for the fire trucks, and then those people that aren't comfortable, can maybe drop their ballot off, in another way. But those.
I guess that gets back to just us on our end trying to figure out the logistical must-dos around that. It's just like there's a range of questions. So if we have a group of people that feel comfortable, they're donning PPE, they're staying 6 feet apart, and do we move in second items? We vote on those items by a show of hands. We record those. We move in second the next article. We record those hand votes and so on and so forth. We tally those up, and then we wait for folks to come. We check those individuals in as they drive in to make sure they're registered voters. We issue them and then, yes, I suppose after moved and seconded by folks in the bay that felt comfortable being there, we would then have to print out if it was exactly how we had it intended in the beginning, or if they amend items, then like Kristen says, we'll have to have a little bit of time to print out amended ballots, and then folks would vote on those. We would then reacquire those ballots and then tally up the written ballot numbers plus the open votes of the hand vote, and the sum of those two would be the final disposition.
Like in a normal election where you have on-scene voting and absentee ballots. But of course, that's all dependent upon the governor allowing that to even happen. So I wouldn't get too far out in front of planning it.
Right.
Well, no, I mean, it's the written stuff that Kristen was talking about is allowed even without moves from the governor.
Yes.
I think the oddity would be that it is a hybrid between like typically anyone can call, you get to Article 7 or whatever, and it's the fire budget, and someone somehow doesn't feel comfortable raising their hand saying yes or no, you can call for a secret ballot, and then as long as you get a majority vote for that secret ballot, then you can move forward on that. But I've, unprecedented times, and I'll try to wrap my head around it, but just like the standard way is if it's a secret written ballot, or written ballot, not secret ballot, then that's it. It's all written and there is no hand voting. So we're just talking about a hybrid between those in attendance doing hand voting after it's already been called that it's a written vote. Because if it's not called that it's a written vote, then we can't accept those written ballots.
Yeah,
Okay,
don't
but
be-
I
Go ahead.
I'm having trouble getting my head around why we want to expose anybody to risk that we don't have to. And when the only thing, in my view, that we have to do before August 1st is have a budget.
I think we have to get.
And we can do that.
Present.
We can have a budget with minimal risk by following Kristen's scenario. So I'm having trouble with why expand the envelope there.
I think, and I can't answer this as a lawyer, but like Kristen said, we can't necessarily deny if it's an open town meeting of which we're just calling for written ballots. If people show up, I can't deny them. I have to then find a place for them and seat them and allow them to participate. It's just like with regular voting. If someone shows up and they're a registered voter and they say, I want to vote, it's our job to go out of our way and ensure that they can do that. So it's not like we would be necessarily encouraging folks to do that, but how else do I do it? If they show up and say, I want to participate, I can't deny them that opportunity.
Well, let me clarify that with her. Because this didn't come up in the earlier discussion at all of interlopers coming in. So
Not talking about interlopers, Walter. We're talking about town people who aren't hesitant to meet. Not everyone shares your view of, hey, I don't want to be around 10 people. As you see every day in Augusta, there's a lot of people feel that, hey, let's get on with life here and let's do it. I don't think that we can say you can't come to town meeting if we're going to hold one. And I think that's what
I know that.
So
I totally know that. And I want to have a town meeting.
So I think it is a hybrid, because I think you hold a town meeting and you give those people that are comfortable physically being present the option to do so. And those that are not, rather than just disregard their vote and not allow them to participate, come up with a way that would allow them to feel safe, but still have a say in the budget. So I think it is kind of a hybrid we're talking about. You know, I worry, as somebody mentioned, you know, if you just go by Zoom, we're all assuming everybody's got access to that. And I know that there's a whole lot of people that don't.
Sure, I know that too.
Those people are denied the opportunity to participate if we don't let them physically show up. If they don't come, even though we give them an opportunity, that's their decision.
There are some
I don't think we're
additional
going to solve this tonight, but
No.
comments. Penny said, why can't we, that was the question about July. Dorothy said, for public health reasons, we should wait as long as we can. We've only had 2 participants, Penny and Dorothy. And then Dorothy said, you cannot make participation at town meeting contingent upon whether or not people are willing to put themselves and others at risk. You can, that doesn't make it right, but this life is filled with risk. We're just at a higher risk state than normal and typical. And even under normal circumstances, if there's the flu going around and it's a standard flu and not corona, you know, people make their own decision on coming and participating with a group of others and exposing themselves to that, or they don't. But yes, I mean, it falls on you all on what it is that you give us and the staff directive on actioning out, and it should be in response to concerns of the community.
all right, well, everybody keep their ears to the ground, because this will be a hot agenda item for our meeting next week, because we'll start to be approaching decision time then. And we'll have a budget discussion tomorrow.
And I think you still have a motion, and I vote
Yes.
aye.
Cheryl,
Aye.
Walter, aye. See you tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.